I love that. And what you said makes me think, I just want to like double down on your point. Like when we think about leadership and the discourse about companies and employees and stuff like that, it's always about like what what is my employee doing for me, right? But
Uh-huh.
what you're saying is that reciprocal relationship of, we can't expect things from people without also investing them from them in return, right? And so I love how you describe that of we have to recognize that if we want the best from our people, we have to give them the best of us at the same time. And the best of us is our care and compassion.
Welcome to Season 2 of Clearing Obstacles, the podcast for leaders and those that want to be, because no organization, not even yours, can thrive without effective leadership. As you master this skill, it will become the superpower that gains the love and respect of your team, the freedom you seek in your life and business, and ultimately, the success of your vision. Now in Season 2, we're bringing you the voices of thought leaders who have a unique and valuable perspective to share on how to reimagine and redefine leadership in our world today. We'll be diving into topics of vision and authority and accountability, management, culture, vulnerability, and more, because they all fall on the shoulders of today's leaders. Are you one of those exceptional people? Well, you can be. Our guests all have extensive theoretical and philosophical depth that's also matched by their experience in the practical application of those principles. And we think you're going to agree. So all of you emerging and evolving leaders, buckle up as we clear the obstacles to help you get there from here. Welcome to the Clearing Obstacles podcast, where we help you get there from here. Today, we are so fortunate to be joined by Stephanie Harrison. Stephanie is the founder of The New Happy and is about to launch a book of the same name called New Happy, Getting Happiness Right in a World That's Got It Wrong. Now, I first discovered Stephanie's work on both LinkedIn and Instagram, and I have been a fan of her elegantly designed visuals that accompany her messaging that's built around really helping us all to collectively reevaluate what authentic happiness looks and feels like, and how to reframe the way we view ourselves and the world and our place in it. With that, Stephanie, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm overjoyed to be here.
And I am just delighted to get you. You were one of my first gets, one of my first bookings for this. And I tell you, it just charged my engine and put fuel in the tank for me to get guests booked
I'm
for the
so
season.
grateful.
Good. Wonderful. Let's just jump right in. Can you start out by identifying a few of the fundamentals that help to contrast what you call old happy with new happy, just to kind of give us a basic framework of the conversation today? Tell us a little bit about your origin story and where this whole thing came from.
So really, I often think that my pursuit of the study of happiness began with my own unhappiness. I think in so many ways, having challenging experiences also ends up leading us to our purpose and helping us to find our way. And so when I was in my early 20s, I had gotten this job I'd dreamed about. I had this nice apartment I'd always wanted. I had complete freedom and no obligations or responsibilities. And yet I was abjectly miserable. And I blamed myself. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And ultimately, it came to a head when I experienced a host of, challenges with my physical health and my mental health and my relationships. And ultimately, I had this moment of clarity of wondering, maybe it's not a problem with me. Maybe it's the story that I've been told about what I need to do in order to be happy. And that little moment is what inspired me to want to go and study happiness and figure out what a better way might look like.
Wow. I love that. I'm curious. Some people have these epiphanies that just are like a thunderbolt, and others, it's like it's a journey of 3-4 years of clarity that just kind of drizzles its way in. Do you remember how that clarity came to you?
It was a quiet thunderbolt. So it wasn't something where I got struck down and I was like, everything must change. It was more of this moment of quiet curiosity, really, of thinking, oh, well, I've been so stuck in my worldview here. I've been so stuck in this set of beliefs that I didn't even realize that there was a way to exist outside of those beliefs until that moment. It was like suddenly, looking at a two-dimensional image and realizing it's three-dimensional, something like that, where
Yeah.
your whole mindset shifts around it. And then I had to do the hard work of following it and actually putting that into practice, which took many, many, many years.
I got to put a finger on the irony of that because, I mean, your experience and your breadth of education on this topic is significant. It's really impressive. Master's in positive psychology from University of Pennsylvania. You worked under Dr. Martin Seligman, who is world-renowned scholar on the subject of happiness and flourishing. I've got the trifecta of his books there behind me that I like to refer to occasionally. You led a team at LinkedIn in internal well-being leader was one of your titles. Like, given the scope of your experience, don't you find that ironic that you found yourself in that position?
Yeah, it's funny because basically what happened was after that moment of curiosity, I realized, okay, I want to study well-being. And then that's what led to all of those experiences. But it was like a pursuit that unfolded over time. It wasn't something where I ever had some master plan or idea of how I was going to fulfill this idea that I wanted to in some way help people to be happier.
Uh-huh.
But what it started, like one step at a time. So I was living in New York when I had this breakdown. I moved out to California. I got a job at LinkedIn. While I was at LinkedIn, my dad introduced me to Marty's books, actually. He kept saying, "You should read this book. You should read this book. I think you'll love it." And that's what sort of turned me on to the science of happiness and helped me to start learning about it. And then from there, I learned about the grad program. And so I went and applied and did that. And then eventually kind of like continued to follow this, I guess, North Star, never really knowing where it was going to take me, but just trusting that eventually it would guide me to the right place. And as I did, I was able to, learn a great deal about this topic that I was so passionate about.
Wow. Okay. So I just had the sequence wrong. There's not really an irony there. It sounds like the conversation you were having with yourself really brought about that evolution.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's great. I referenced Dr. Seligman's books, and admittedly, I have not read any of the three of them cover to cover. I heard it's just a little anecdote here, a great analogy the other day, and forgive me, whoever said this, and I can't give proper attribution to. They said, you can't look at your library as this, shelves of obligations. Look at it as a wine cellar. And when the right moment comes to uncork that bottle, it'll be there for you. In the meantime, it's this collection of brilliant ideas that when you need it, it'll be there. In the meantime, it's not an obligation. It's a set of resources that you have available to you. That's I have 10 times more books than I have actually read cover to cover, at least. And anyway, that helped reframe that
That's
for me.
That's so lovely. It just speaks to your intellectual curiosity and desire to keep learning. I love that.
Yeah. I have to put myself on an intervention occasionally and say, all right, we're doing a book buying fast for a while. I'm not going to. Yours being an exception. I can't wait for it to launch. Tell us a little bit about the launch. This is going to air, I believe, about a week before this thing drops. Tell us a little bit about this.
So in the moment that you are listening to this, you can trust that I will be very, very anxious.
I'm sure.
That'll be how I'm feeling in that moment. So the book is really the culmination of everything that I've learned on this 10-year journey. And I've really had been working on it for 10 years at this point, mostly because part of the work that I've done has been developing this new philosophy of happiness, a new approach to well-being that I think we desperately need, both as individuals, but also as a collective. Yeah. And so the book is designed to be, almost like your step-by-step guide to happiness. It contains absolutely everything you need to know, both in terms of unwinding old happy, these influences that have led you astray, but then also figuring out how to walk the proven path to well-being and how to apply that. No matter who you are, no matter what your life looks like, no matter what your goals are, it should give you almost a blueprint to help you to really put these ideas to practice in a practical way.
I can't wait. I can't wait. We'll put a link in the show notes for how to pre-order this thing. I know Stephanie, I assume they will probably still be active at the time. Stephanie's offering all kinds of incentives for pre-orders. We know how those publishing games work, and the more pre-orders purchased, the more successful that launch usually goes. So if you're interested, get in there early, get in there quick, and take advantage of some of these incentives that Stephanie is offering as well on some of the pre-order stuff. I did myself, and I can't wait for some of these added values. Just the book in and of itself will be a tremendous value. But
thank you.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, can you give us a little bit of the flawed thinking, the flawed approach that exists with what you refer to as old happy?
Yeah, of course. So old happy is society's definition of happiness, and then the culture we've created around it that not only supports it, but enforces it. So old happy is invisible, which makes it really, really hard to understand and to talk about. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I wanted to give it a name so that we could start to separate ourselves from it. Because right now, it's something that's very internalized within us in terms of the values that we have, the goals that we set for ourselves, the way that we see ourselves. And by naming it, my hope is that we'll be able to free ourselves from it. And so old happy is the result of really these three forces of our society that instill these values within us. And those forces are individualism, capitalism, and domination. And they teach us certain lessons about who we are and what we need to do and how we're related to other people. And so there are these three core lies of old happy that are actually making us miserable. And in the book, I dig into each one, but if you want, we can go one by one as well, if you want to dig into them a little bit more.
Maybe, yeah. As much time as we have and as much without giving the book away here.
No, I love to share it.
Yeah, so individualism, domination,
and capitalism.
And
these big forces that make up our culture, right?
Yeah.
Like these are big ideas and they feel very separate from our daily lives, but they actually have a huge impact upon us. And my argument is that they instill in us these values and beliefs. And so the first belief, which I know you're going to understand, Dan, from I'm sure you see this a lot with the work that you do. The first belief is that you're not enough. You're lacking something. There's something wrong with you. Deep down, you're bad. You're horrible. You're flawed. You don't deserve anything good in your life. And that one really comes from those three forces come together and influence all of these. But in many ways, it's also a result in this idea that we have that comes from our domination-oriented culture, which is that your self-esteem is based upon how you compare to other people. And in order to be worthy, you have to show that you're the best. You have to prove just how good you are. And there are so many different ways to do that. One of them being through what we achieve, which is the second lie. But ultimately, we end up with this deep, deep, profound core wound that feels like we can never really address because there's always something that we need to prove and always someone we need to become and a list of qualifications that we need to embody in order to finally be worthy.
Right. I'm so intrigued by this because, and we'll hear this theme across the scope of season 2 of the Clearing Obstacles podcast. It's a concept that I refer to as blissful ambition. And it's this two terms that on the surface are paradoxical. Blissfulness is this idea that everything is perfect just as it is. What's that Buddhist phrase? You're perfect just as you are, and you have room to improve. Absolute contentment with the way things are, and which we all aspire to in some way. We all crave this level of bliss, I think, to some degree. I think I can safely say that that's a collective desire for most of us. And ambition. And I would hate for anybody to get the perception that we're vilifying ambition in a way that kind of negates its value in our own self-worth or achievement, or no better way to put it than our own self-efficacy, right? If you aspire to achieve something, gain 20 pounds, lose 20 pounds, run a marathon, build this company, where do we get that wrong? Where does that go sideways? Because I think there's a lot of healthy relationship we can have to ambition. Where do we tank it?
I agree. I think the issue we have is we predicate our self-worth based on the success or failure of that ambition. So if you have a goal to, lose 20 pounds or gain 20 pounds, for example, if you don't do it, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
You're broken, right? It's all your fault. And that's really, again, bringing us back to individualism. That is all about putting the onus on the person rather than on any other factors that might be affecting them. So it's wonderful to want things, to have ambition, and to have goals that matter to you. And that's a core part of being a human being.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to counsel people against is viewing the pursuit of that ambition as something that defines who they are as a person. And there's this method that I talk about, which is called the breakup, which is taking who you are and separating it from what you do.
Okay.
And by breaking up those two things, you can say to yourself, I'm worthy just as I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I made a mistake. And that's okay. People make mistakes, and I'm a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And from that lens, it's a lot easier to bounce back from that mistake or to move forward from it. And the same is true if you have a win instead. I'm worthy, and I got promoted at work today.
Right.
It doesn't define me. It's just something that I did. It was, a part of who I am. And that actually leads right into the second lie, which is this idea that once you achieve certain goals, then you will be happy. Once you reach this magical, mystical point of achievement, then all of your problems will go away and
Right.
you'll be happy forever,
Right.
essentially.
Right.
And so those achievements are often used to prove one's self-worth, which is done through comparison to others and through comparing the achievements that you have versus they have. It's the currency of self-worth in many ways is how successful you are. And so we have to start by breaking that apart from our true selves and all that they are and have to offer and how they want to grow.
Right. And that's been kind of debunked with the phrase that I just love. It's kind of a mouthful, but hedonic adaptation. You can talk to anybody who has achieved a certain level of success, and as soon as they get it, as soon as that movie star has inked their first $3 million movie deal, it's not like some magic switch is flipped and now they feel worthy. Now they feel enough. Now they need a $5 million contract. And now they're worried about where their next thing's going to come from. Or and that's at any level of success. I'm just speaking of people like that because they're kind of high profile. And there's some specific examples that are out there that are kind of public where people achieve just unprecedented levels of success and are still some of the most miserable people or are at a more miserable place in their life than they ever. Maybe it's because now they have achieved it and they still aren't whole. And you can see how that could amplify the misery that they could be feeling.
What am I doing wrong? Again, it goes right back around to the idea of what's wrong with me? Why am I broken? And why am I lacking something? Right?
Yeah. You mentioned this concept of worthiness and in a lot of your content. What I love about it is, again, just the elegance of the design. And we all process information differently. Somebody can tell us, we can hear the same message from 10 different people in 10 different ways. And it's that 11th time where it clicks. And the visuals that you create, and is it New Happy Co? Is that Instagram handle? And again, you're prolific. A lot of the same content is on LinkedIn and we'll share any other channels that you have in the show notes as well. But the way you present these concepts with these such minimalistic and simple designs that they're these kind of animated shapes and iconography that is so compelling. It's one of the things that turned me on to it so much was just you were that 11th person to give me a particular message where I went, yeah, God damn it, she's right. And only then did it real. I could academically know it. I coach this stuff all day, every day, right? And I work with people on this all day, and we can still struggle with it in our own way. And anyway, just hats off to the way you've designed these visuals, because we all learn and process it differently. But the visual element of the way you've captured these ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Do you design this stuff? I've been very curious about that.
Yeah. So I started making this art during the beginning of the pandemic. I'd always wanted to be an artist when I was a kid but never pursued it. I always thought it was way too impractical. And I'd always had this sort of, I guess, ability to think in pictures and have these mental representations of ideas. And once I started reading all of these studies as part of my pursuit of building this philosophy, I would have these flashes of ways of representing the core ideas. And I always thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could find a way to share these with people? And I I really didn't think people would connect with them in the way that they did. I thought there's no way that people will see things the way that I see them in my head, right? But I guess what's been really amazing is seeing the beauty of this experience in terms of making this artwork and then getting to see and connect with people who respond to it is just seeing how unalone we really are, right? Like if somebody out there can see this image that's made of, 4 circles or whatever, and
Yeah.
they have an emotional reaction to it and they feel like it represents their inner experience or their goals or their dreams. And like that to me is miraculous because it just shows how connected we all really are and how much of this is shared and we just don't have the right way of communicating it about it. And, I think the artwork is almost like a safe bridge in for people to help explore these ideas. Perhaps they wouldn't normally consume other personal growth content or other psychology content or whatever it is, but because this is different, it's more accessible and intuitive to them in some way.
I do know. I love the word you use. It's accessible that way. Like I don't have to read a white paper, some academic study about it. I could literally in a 10-second graphic, it sinks in a very different way.
Thanks. Well,
Yeah.
I often will do the same. Like sometimes I think that the making of these pieces has really helped me to internalize the idea even more. So as a creator, I get to benefit. But then even still, when I'm having my own human moments where I'm overwhelmed with anger or feeling lost or feeling frustrated or whatever it is, I'm like, okay, I've made something about this. Like,
Yep.
how would I
Eat your
think
own
about
cooking,
this?
Stephanie.
Exactly.
It's got to be a little bit crazy for you right now with a book coming out and doing the book tour and promoting that. And I mean, it seems like your face is kind of everywhere these days. You know what I love the most about it is that I get to see it again for me. And second, that if it's resonating with that many people, then the chances of people finding this elusive new happy are that much greater. So when I see it being shared by this abundance of other users out there, it just thrills me because again, it brings together this, like you said, this elusive common human condition that we all kind of share.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So in preparation for this, I sent you kind of a questionnaire, again, just to kind of prepare us both for this conversation. And I asked you a quote that resonates with you. And do you remember the quote I said?
I think so.
That you find to be impactful, that made an impact on you, a quote or an idea. Do you remember what it was?
I think so, but I'm going to have you read it.
No worries. The quote was, "You must do the thing you think you cannot do."
Yes. I love that line.
I do too. Now tell me though, how does that juxtapose with one's worthiness? Because on the surface, that can feel like a contradiction.
Yeah. I think I reject that it's a contradiction. I completely reject this idea that you can't, like, I accept myself fully most days. I have my moments, like, for sure, where I do not, and I get critical and stuff. But most of the time, when I think about how far I've come from where I was 10 years ago to where I am today, I think like it wouldn't be too strong to say that I like hated myself, I don't think that would be an overreaction to how I felt about myself.
Wow.
And so I've come a really long way and it feels night and day, right?
Yeah.
Like it feels miraculous. And I also know that I can hold both truths at the same time of I am completely acceptable right now just as I am. And I could lie down on my bed and sleep all day. It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't make me less worthy. It wouldn't make me love myself less. It wouldn't change my belief that I'm worthy of love and care from other people.
Right.
And then because I love myself, I want to express myself in new ways and share myself with the world in the ways that I can in order to help other people to be happy. Because that's what I believe the secret to happiness is, helping other people to be happy. So it would be a disservice for me to not try and overcome the very many psychological challenges that I have, which is where that quote kind of strikes me as like, it's in your head, right? The thing you think you cannot do, but then in reality, you probably can do it. That has held me back and countless ways and manifestations over the years. And so there's this core of self that needs to be accepted. And then the self also needs to be expressed and expanded through what we do. And the two ideas to me are actually complementary and supportive of one another.
Agreed. I love the way you put that. They're not contradictory. In fact, they're complementary. Yeah.
And I'm somebody who's struggled with fear a lot. Like, I think that would be, if I was thinking about my life and the challenges that, I faced and the things that have gotten in my way, I would probably sum it all up as like fear, the fear bucket.
Right.
And so learning to get past my fear has been the unlock, I guess, for helping me to express myself in the ways that I want to.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? So fear's going to be present. There's nothing we can do. Like if you got a beating heart and you've got gray matter between your ears, fear's going to show up.
Yeah.
In your experience, what are some effective ways? And this applies to everybody, every age, every level of professional accomplishment or otherwise. What are some ways that we can acknowledge that fear and still press forward?
For me, it's been fear is my friend. It's just trying to protect me. It has a job to do. It's
Great.
trying to make sure that I'm safe and that I don't die, which is what it worries is going to happen all the time.
Right.
Like
that
it
damn
wants
amygdala.
it wants to help me, and me demeaning it isn't going to make it go away. I tried that for many years and it did not work. So befriending it and saying, okay, what is it that you're actually scared of here? Like, let's talk about it. Let's explore it a little bit. Even just the simple practice of writing down, here's my fear. And like, here's what my, the bad guy in my head is saying is going to happen. And then realizing that, okay, probably pretty unlikely, but also if it does happen, I've gone through some hard times. I've overcome a lot of challenges. I've faced a lot of difficult emotions. I could probably deal with these ones too. Even if I don't want to, it's something that I probably can get through. And then also giving myself proof that I can overcome my fear, like doing small things that help me to say, okay, that was really scary. The first time I posted on Instagram, I had a meltdown. Like I was terrified. I didn't have social media before that. I really didn't like social media. The irony of that now is so funny, but I was utterly terrified. And then like as I got used to posting on the new Happy, then when I decided to start posting, more personal videos and things like that, that took me like a year to get up the courage to do. And so it's just like starting to accumulate, hey, you've done these things before. Again, it's kind of going back to what you said, building your self-efficacy about overcoming your fear.
Right. There's a meditation teacher on the Calm app that I love. He does a series called The Daily Trip. His name's Jeff Warren, I believe. And one of the exercises that I go back to all the time, I favorite it and I love going back to it, is to literally thank that fear. Thank you for protecting me. I appreciate you. You're doing your job. Now, have a seat. You're welcome to stay in the car. But either move over to the passenger seat or maybe even get in the back, because you don't need to be driving. You don't need to be driving. Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for protecting me. And you're not really useful right this moment.
I love that.
I do too. In those moments, I've actually found that useful as well. I think we all get that. I mean, God, I think especially leaders, thought leaders, people who are trying to carve a new path, we're plagued by that because of imposter syndrome and questions of our worthiness and the fear of of it failing, because, and again, we're tying our self-worth to that.
Yeah. So true.
The way you've described all of this is, I hate to be so binary about it, but it feels a little bit, it's kind of philosophical. It's a little esoteric. It's kind of theoretical. And we need that. You have to understand the meta of the whole concept. What I'm curious about from your experience, because you've lived this in tactical situations, right? You spent some time at LinkedIn as an employee and a couple really compelling roles there. You worked with Thrive Global, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And so you've gotten to see the moment to moment experiences that people have and how this can tactically show up in an organization, be that a nonprofit or, the parent-teacher association or
Mm.
a company. What are some experiences where you've seen, like practically speaking, where a leader can help an employee ground themselves in their worthiness and support them in fulfilling the expectations of their role?
Yeah. I would say that these two things are not at odds. So the more that you as a leader can invest in helping the person that you work for, or that works for you,
Mm-hmm.
to feel like they're good enough, that they belong, that they have strengths and talents that matter, the better they're going to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one component of Old Happy that is really relevant to the workplace is this idea, that this kind of spin on the worthy idea that people are bad. Like, the workplace has an inherent assumption that people are bad
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. They need to be controlled. They need to be coerced into doing things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to constantly check on them and make sure they're not doing anything that's leading you astray, all of that kind of oversight.
Right.
And a lot of these more kind of, I would say, like leading edge companies, like the ones that I've gotten the chance to work at or that I work with, in some ways through some of my work, they are trying to shift that to a recognition of the employee's goodness and honoring their value as a person and who they are through their self-worth. And so the more that you as a leader can help the person who works for you to recognize that, again, they are separate from their performance. You can value them as a person and still at the same time give them meaningful feedback about how they need to grow and improve.
Mm-hmm.
You can coach them in new ways. You can help them to see, hey, I need to invest my time and energy in upskilling in this way in order for me to maintain this role at the company.
Yeah.
Those things are possible. And in fact, they're supportive, but you have to start with care. You have to start with caring about the person who is in front of you and not seeing them as this machine to be exploited or this person to be controlled. It all really begins with the recognition of their humanity. And ultimately, that's going to come back and actually help you to feel much better at work at the same time, too.
Wow, well put. And the synergies that can come from that, I'm so tired of that buzzword, but it just applies to accurately to this. The synergies that come from that, if they feel that you care, they're going to hear your healthy accountability in an entirely different way. Not as a criticism, but as authentic helpfulness in you succeeding within the organization.
Yeah, I took this class, I think like 9 years ago, maybe even longer, with a professor of management, but his name is George Kohlreiser, and he was a hostage negotiator before he got into management. And so all of his insights come from this work he did with negotiations, and really cool, amazing guy, and has this lovely body of work that I highly recommend to all leaders. It really changed the way that I perceived workplace interactions. And his idea really comes from attachment theory that was done in the 50s and 60s about looking at parent-child relationships. But the idea is that as a manager, you have to be a secure base for your employee. You have to be a safe space to go. You have to be a place where they can really share what's going on and be the support system for them in order for them to reach the heights that they want to. And he uses this metaphor of, a rock climber and then the person belaying them at the bottom. Like, you as the manager have to be the one holding on to them so that they can keep climbing. And you do that by being a caring and loving presence in their life.
Right.
And what he talks about is that when he was negotiating with hostages, trying to secure their release, the only way he ever was able to do it was through creating a caring relationship with the person who had taken them hostage. It was the only way that he could get them to overcome the other things that were in their way. So care is one possible in even the most intense of circumstances, ones that most of us will never face in our workplaces.
Right.
And two, care has the power to do things that seem impossible.
Yeah.
So to me, that's such an inspirational testimonial to the power that we have if we just start with the human in front of us.
Oh my God, I couldn't agree more. Any of my clients that I've had over the years and any future, you will hear me talk about this ad nauseum, honestly, about having the commitment to coaching and mentoring your people. If your business isn't first and foremost about the development of the people who are in your organization and maybe by extension your customers, like you're missing that. You've got these human beings that show up, just as you were describing. They're showing up every day. They've got their challenges, their fears, their struggles, their concerns, their issues, as we all do. And if you're not feeling seen as an employee, as a human being, but rather a cog, that's going to be reciprocal. It's going to be, devolve into this transactional relationship. And by extension, if you're not caring about them, honey, they're not going to care about you. They're not going to care about you at all or your organization, right? They may care about the paycheck. They may care about being retained as an employee and probably flying under the radar and their own version of quiet quitting or whatever it is, but it's not going to extend out into their performance if they don't feel cared for.
So well said. I love that. And what you said makes me think, I just want to double down on your point. Like when we think about leadership and the discourse about companies and employees and stuff like that, it's always about what is my employee doing for me, right? But what you're saying is that reciprocal relationship of, we can't expect things from people without also investing from them in return, right? And so I love how you describe that of, we have to recognize that if we want the best from our people, we have to give them the best of us at the same time. And the best of us is our care and compassion.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to issue a word of caution to any leaders out there who are considering this. It's not a slam dunk. I can think of one client in particular who swallowed this whole thing hook, line, and sinker. He wholeheartedly believed in it, wholeheartedly executed on it, was fully vested in the well-being of his team. And little by little, they attrited out for one reason or another. One, it was just an extension of, one of their parents had health problems and they had to quit. So kind of not avoidable. Another one, frankly, did not have the level of emotional maturity to reciprocate on the care that he was showing them. And this isn't a slam dunk. Over the period of about a year and a half, he lost 4 of his 5 employees and was to be fully transparent, was really Dan, what is this crap you've been, encouraging me to do here with my team and showing this level of care and investing this much in who they are and their well-being. I've lost 80% of my people over the past 18 months. And I, again, word of caution, yes, that might very well happen to you. And what I can tell you is today, this is about a year later, he has completely transformed his roster on his team, and everybody on the team at this point has wholeheartedly different engagement with him, with their brand, with the products, services they offer their customers. It took some time. And unfortunately, he hired the wrong people in the first place is kind of tactically what it came down to. He hired people who, and not entirely, again, some of those circumstances were beyond anybody's control, but for several of them, 2 or 3 of those employees, they did not share the values to begin with. So he could give and give and give, and all that did was contribute to their entitlement. They weren't the right people. You get the right team on board and they have a shared value system, it's gonna pay off. And like I said, I've seen it manifest very successful team building and human development over the years with my clients. And I've also seen them crash and burn a couple of times, but through perseverance and sticking with it and really believing, this is where I think the theory and the philosophy of it does matter. You have to believe in that as an effective approach. Again, not as an outcome-based, I'm going to make millions of dollars if I just care about my team. That's kind of false care, and it's frankly just gross manipulative. But if you authentically do, I have yet to see it not actually shake out with the results that they were looking for.
Leadership is a long game, isn't it?
It is a long game. Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, with that, and this is, I wasn't even expecting to go there. In a lot of the coaching engagements that I have, be they with small business owners or executive coaching, there's a balance that I always try and strike with my clients for short, mid, and long-term value or short, mid, and long-term gains that they're getting. Can you say a few words about what are some short-term things that we as leaders can do that will provide that short-term value? What are some things we can do? And does it just naturally follow suit, that's going to emerge into long game success as well?
Mm.
Kind of an esoteric sideways question. So if you can.
No, it's really interesting. I think, and you're looking for short-term like activities and practices they could do, right?
Yeah. One-on-one conversations
Yeah.
or healthy accountability or.
I think there's many short-term. I have become a profound believer in like the daily action ladders up into something so much greater because I've seen it play out in my own life in so many different ways. So I do absolutely think it's possible. And when I think about short-term activities or practices that have a ton of leverage for the future, I would say one is getting to know your employee as a person and doing that by having meaningful conversations with them. There's this concept in the relationship literature from the Gottmans, who are kind of the leading researchers on romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And they have this concept called a love map, which is essentially a map of your partner's inner world. And it's the things they care about, the people in their lives, the goals that they have, basically their inner experience, and you know about it. And I think that concept actually really applies to all of our relationships as well. And almost building this map of who is this person and what do they care about and what matters to them, because the more that you know about that, the better you can lead them. So spending the time, whether it's asking them to grab coffee for 15 minutes or asking specific questions in your one-on-ones, getting to know them and their lives and figuring out who they really are as a person, that will only lead to long-term benefits down the road. Another one that I think is really powerful is strategy that I like to think of as being a mirror. So mirroring other people's strengths back to them, showing them who they are, because our self-esteem is in many ways shaped by the messages that we receive from the people around us and what we hear that we're good at. And so if you as a leader recognize that you're in a position of power in many ways and of authority, your words have a greater weight than other people's. And so they are taken more seriously and they are more thoughtfully reflected upon, and they're probably shared with your spouse when you get home from work, and like they become a huge influencer in your life. So when you are talking to your employees, make sure that you're reflecting back to them the things that you see that they're doing well, even if it's something small like, hey, the way that you handled that difficult customer today, that was really great. I think you're really, really talented at being patient in hard moments. If somebody said that to me, like if my boss said that to me, I'd be touched, right? And I would carry that with me and I'd go, I'm a patient person. That's something I'm good at. And I would take that and like throw it into my self-concept and move forward with it. And so leaders should be mirrors to show other people what they're wonderful at, because it helps them to grow.
Oh God, that's brilliant. And I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm so glad I asked that question because your response was just brilliant. And piggybacking on that there's two points. The first is I don't want to forget about the value that will bring to you as a leader in your own joy that you get because you're having a meaningful engagement with these people who are exchanging the minutes of their lives for your dollars, right? And it evolves it beyond a transactional relationship to something that's a little bit more authentic, a lot more authentic perhaps. So you're just as a leader, you're going to get the inherent joy from that authentic relational care that you bring to the conversation. And the second point to that is, again, I don't want this to be misconstrued as anything that's like tactical or manipulative, because I think with the wrong spirit, it can absolutely be viewed that way. Oh, I got to know what matters to them. Now I know how to motivate them. But there's something to that. How can you possibly know how to intrinsically motivate your people if you don't even know who the hell they are? Because we know, long game, extrinsic motivation doesn't work. It's the carrot stick thing that it doesn't work long game. You might keep people around for a long time, but are they the right people for you? And are they happy? And are you fulfilled in that? If we can have that insight into their humanness, now we have a map for their intrinsic motivation. And they're feeling more joy and fulfillment. And if you don't think that that's not going to filter down into the customer relationships that they have or how they engage with their colleagues in the workplace, I don't even know what to tell you.
Try it and find out.
Try it and find out. Exactly. I love that. Try it and find out. Do you have any specific stories to share that exemplify a transformation? Change the names to protect the innocent and the guilty if you need to. But in your professional experiences, are there any specific stories that kind of stick out to you?
Oh gosh, I mean, I feel like everything I am is because of the support that I received from other people
Yeah.
and the kindness that they showed me. I had in my first role at LinkedIn, I was managing our company's largest book of business, and I was responsible for client service of the ongoing accounts. And I had a sales partner whose name was Joel, and he was the salesperson responsible. And he'd been working at LinkedIn for since almost the very beginning. He became my mentor and my friend, and he saw something in me, and he allowed me to grow and to transform as an employee through the ways in which he supported me and the compliments and the mirroring that he gave me. So when I started, there were sort of like two people on the client service side. One was much more senior and I was the junior person. And I did a presentation for him and he said, you're an amazing speaker and I love how strategic you're being about this. I've never seen that before. I'd like you to work more closely with the senior person involved. And then that senior person left a couple of weeks later unexpectedly. And because he championed me, I was able to move into that role despite having far less experience and, qualifications really.
Sure.
But he pointed those things out to me. He told me what he thought I was good at, and he encouraged me to invest in my growth and my development. And when I told him, hey, I'm really passionate about happiness and there's this master's degree that I want to do, but I'm going to keep working here and I have to fly back and forth to Philly every 3 weeks and I'm going to be out of the office, every month and all that. He said, you have to do that. I will support you at every step of the way. Here's how we're going to make this work. I will cover for you in these ways. He stepped up for me again and again. And he was somebody who helped make me who I am, right?
Wow.
That's, and I loved him. Like I do, like he's an amazing person. And I feel like I would have done anything for him.
Yeah.
I would have worked as hard as I needed to support him because I always felt like he really cared about me.
Wow.
And it was never transactional. I never felt that any sort of like what you're describing. It wasn't like he was doing it to exploit me. He was doing it because he just really cared.
Right.
And that's the kind of leader that I aspire to be as a person. And he's just uniquely gifted in that and such an amazing exemplar of that for me. But I look up to him as someone who I'm like, oh, I would like to be like him someday. And he made it possible for me to be where I am today.
What a touching and compelling story. I love that. Shout out to Joel. Man, wherever you are, make sure you share the link with him to this so he hears the shout out. Joel, thank you for doing that. And anybody listening to this, like it just underscores the scalable impact that we have as leaders. You're not going to end up with a bunch of Stephanies necessarily in your crew, but the impact that Joel had, for example, on you just through sharing that first thing and then piggybacking on that and continuing to champion you in your professional endeavors and your ambitions in that way and your curiosities and support you in that way. Like now look at, through this cascading effect, the impact that you're having on millions of people, the value that has brought to the world from his guidance, his mentorship, and essentially his care.
Yeah. And, that's the thing. That's what we're here for. Like, we're here to have those ripple effects. I always say, like, if I had to boil down the new happy philosophy to one sentence, it's we're here to help each other. Mm-hmm. And it's the only thing that makes anything possible. And every piece of help that I received from Joel, from all of the other people in my life who did things to support me and to help me cultivate any talents that I might have, all of that, we never know how much a simple action can really make a difference, right? Like Joel, knowing him and probably most of the people listening, you probably take for granted all of those things that you do. You're like, oh, that's just being a good human. That's just the right thing to do, or that's just my job. But in fact, you're changing the world. Like that's what you're doing with every single moment of care that you express with your employees.
Well put. And I'm all in on that.
Thanks.
And I love the way you describe it as a ripple effect. Every action is causing this ripple, and downstream from that, the interaction that they have with somebody is going to this is why I love your illustrations. I can't even find the words, but these little graphics and examples that you're able to give put it so elegantly and eloquently and really drive the point home. Stephanie, you've got to be jam-packed these days with interviews and conversations and posts and promotion for your book launch and everything. What do you feel you've not had the opportunity to share today, but needs to be heard by leaders and emerging leaders?
I think the one thing that I would want them to know or to consider is that the work that they're doing every day, the showing up and the going to meetings and taking notes and trying to get budget and fulfilling department requests, all that stuff, that's not the real work. That's facilitating the real work, which is what you were just talking about, which is helping people to fulfill their potential and unfold all that they can be and make a difference in the world. And every job has its challenging sides or components, right? No job is perfect. And being a leader can be really challenging. And there's a lot of thankless parts of it that go unseen, that you don't get the credit for, and that can feel like a drain. And I suppose I would just want you to know that what you're doing really matters. What you're doing is so important. Studies have found that one's boss is the most important predictor of happiness at work. And so what you're doing every single day is directly contributing to somebody else's well-being. And what could be more important than that? So thank you for what you're doing. And I hope that every day in different ways, there are opportunities to renew that sense of purpose and contribution that you deserve to feel.
Wow. There is absolutely nothing I can add to that other than my gratitude for you expressing it so perfectly, and my gratitude for kicking off season 2 of the Clearing Obstacles podcast. I'm really stoked for this season. We're going to be talking with more thought leaders on this subject and bringing topics to the table that have to do with that ripple effect of leadership, finding new ways to approach it. And Stephanie, you've just launched us off brilliantly, and I'm so grateful for your time. Again, the link to pre-ordering Stephanie's book, and if you're listening to this post May 14th of 2024, go pick up several copies anyway. Give them away, again, in the spirit of generosity and helping people. I have no doubt that it will provide a ripple effect of that value of generosity as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a joy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We at Best Self Coaching hope you got all that you came here for from today's episode. And if you want more like this, be sure to follow and subscribe to Clearing Obstacles on your favorite listening platform. You can also go to bestself.coach/podcast for more information. There you'll find more episodes and links to the content discussed today, as well as info on how you can get in touch if you're interested in clearing your own obstacles to become the kind of leader that you know your team is waiting for. Your business should serve your life, so let us help you get there from here, because nobody should do this on their own. Thanks again for listening. See you soon.